All right, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I want to take up all of your lunch hour if we can. So my name is Mike Wansi. I am the Associate Executive Director of Government Relations and School Finance here at the Iowa Association of School Boards. Today, we're going to do the second part in our two-part series on in-depth advocacy webinar, and we're going to do the condition of the budget, the 2026 legislative session. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat or into the Q&A, and I will try and answer them as I go along, or if I don't get to them, I'll try and get to it at the end. And today we're going to, let me get to my screen here. Today's goal is really to talk about Iowa's economy, state revenues, and try and bring that down and show you how this impacts your district. Also, we're going to talk about some of the governor's budget recommendations, including school aid and school aid funding, as well as dive a little bit into the property tax discussion. All right, so Iowa Association of School Boards, IASB, identifies 8 standards for effective school boards. Number 5 is fiscal responsibility, sustain and enhance district resources through planning fiduciary oversight. By listening to today's webinar, whether you've joined us right now or you're listening to a recording, you can better understand how Iowa's economy, state finances, and the governor's recommendations can impact your district's finances, and you're fulfilling that standard for effective school boards. All right, jumping in. So Iowa's economy, we sometimes measure this by the leading index indicators. This is a Department of Revenue sort of index of 7 separate Iowa-specific economic indicators as well as one national. And one of the things to note about this is sort of the way that we look to see for contractions in the economy. If more than half of those indicators are negative for at least 6 months, then it sort of shows that the economy has been contracting. We may be in a recession. The good news is right now, only about 3 of the 8 indicators have been negative over the last 6 months. And we can sort of see that because the index is just sort of hovered around a single point for the last 6 months. Although it should be noted that some data has not been reported by the federal government, including housing. But overall, Iowa's economic growth continues to be resilient, if not extremely modest. So some of the other federal government that is not currently getting reported or wasn't reported for at least 1 month was the CPI, Consumer Price Index, our measurement of inflation here in Iowa. So inflation remains at just under 3%. In December, the CPI decreased slightly to 2.7%. This is still above where we were at in the previous decade and still above the targets set by the federal government. One thing of note here is that we are missing some data, and that is due to a lapse in reporting by the federal government. This could have an impact for you this year, and I'm going to kind of show you why. So those CPI indicators can be used for arbitration hearings for collective bargaining purposes. So dates of arbitration hearings and the applicable CPI are listed on the screen here. And you can kind of see in April that we are missing that data. So in consultation with our legal team here, we'd just like to, we're assuming that without an applicable CPI for April, and that since neither Chapter 20 or the Employment Appeal Board has any guidance on this, we believe that the most defensible approach in using CPI for arbitration hearings would likely be the one published before, so that it maintains that sort of 6-month advance. But if you have any questions on this, if it comes up that you may have arbitration hearings in April, please do reach out to our legal team, Anna and David, and also please consult with your own district's own legal counsel. And continuing to look at Iowa's economy and jobs, on the map, you can kind of see by county where the most current unemployment statistics are. So statewide, Iowa is at about 3.5%. This is up from 3.3% a year ago and still up from 2 years ago. We were at about 2.7, 2.8%. However, this is still below the U.S. At 4.4%. And you can kind of see Iowa, it's very different county by county. So there are places along our East Coast that are higher than the 3.5%. We have places along in the Northwest that are well below that. And so you can kind of see where you're at and where you're in your county. Property tax valuations, this still continues to be a conversation and will be a big conversation this year again. If we look at the valuations, and this is not the assessed value, but the actual valuations of of property by class, you can see that residential continues to outpace all other categories of taxable properties. It's increased about 14% over the last 4 years. This has been muted by the rollback, so this doesn't increase at the same rate as your taxable valuations, your assessed values do. But we can kind of see that the residential property owners still pay a larger proportional amount of the property taxes and ours and by category than any other one, and they are increasingly subject to that burden. So why does this matter? One of the reasons that we talk about this, but you don't have to be an economist to take on to be a board member or to be an SBO, but it's good to understand those state and local economies. You might have additional support costs for your district. This could come in the form of nutrition, pantry programs, additional transportation costs if there's job instability or economic uncertainty, and even behavioral issues among students. It has a correlation. Number two, economic factors can create enrollment staffing strains, especially mid-year if you have a high flux of students coming in or leaving. And also taxpayer sensitivity. The reason we say that is that households with job and economic instability are more reactive to tax increases, right? So that can impact on when you may want to choose to go out for your PEPAL or bond votes. All right, so tax cuts, that's really the biggest thing that's driving the revenue coming into the state, and what we should call it the lack of revenue. So the personal income tax rate, as you are all well aware, we did away with our brackets. Now everybody pays a flat 3.8%. There was other tax cuts included in the last 4 years as well that reduce insurance premium tax, eliminate the inheritance tax. The real question is this going to create economic growth? And we don't know the answer to that yet. Hopefully next year we might start seeing whether or not this is going to come to fruition. But what they believe, the legislature and the governor has believed, is that they have created a controlled revenue decline. And that's what the legislature is facing right now. So in 2025, the general fund surplus was about 1.9 billion, reserve funds 930 billion, or million, excuse me, and the taxpayer relief fund was over 4 billion. Projections for this current year now still show a surplus of 1.9 billion. Reserves are still full technically, but they are being reduced, and the taxpayer relief fund has been significantly reduced. So the Revenue Estimating Conference, the REC, plays a crucial role in the state budget process, and there's a limitation of expenditures where the state can only use 99% of anticipated ongoing general fund tax revenue and 95% of any new revenue created to figure out their expenditure limit for the next year. The Iowa Constitution and Iowa law require that the state do a balanced budget. That Revenue Estimating Conference is a 3-member panel that estimates those tax revenues each year. They meet 3 times in October, December, and March. The December one is very important because that's the numbers that the governor has to base her budget on. And that's what we're going to see with the recommendations. This is used by the legislature when appropriating funding. If the March REC estimates are lower, then those new projections must be used by the legislature. If they are higher, then we still use the December estimates to figure out appropriations for the state. So those December REC estimates show that in 2026, there will be an 8.8% decline in revenue coming into the state. It's about $784 million. And we've already seen in 2026, it looks like we're looking at a 8.3 reduction in revenue. So, or excuse me, that was 2025. So as you can kind of see, this is what the legislature and the governor have agreed to do, is sort of create a controlled revenue decline, or at least that's what they seem to be attempting to do here. They believe that they can reduce the revenues, use the surplus dollars to backfill in order for revenues to increase. Currently, the REC, which is supported by the Legislative Services Agency and Department of Management and Department of Revenue, are predicting that we will start to see revenue increases again in 2027. That does remain to be seen, and it does remain to be seen if that's going to be enough to outpace the reduction of surpluses. So I'm not going to go through this whole chart and table here, but I do want to just point out a couple of interesting things here. As we can kind of see, this is your general fund revenues and just sort of those categories. We can see that the personal income tax has been declining. We can see that sales tax has been increasing. So we are buying more. Beer tax is declining, so apparently we're not drinking as much beer. But overall, those net receipts plus transfers, you can kind of see this is the ongoing revenue coming into the state. We've gone from 9.8 billion down to an estimated 8 billion in just a short amount of time, in 3 years. That's a lot. So they are again predicting a little bit of an increase. One of the other things I want to sort of point out is how quickly we are shifting our reliance on sales tax. So in 2022, we had a very little more of a diversified amount of revenue coming into the state. Sales tax was at 35%, income was at 53%, our other, including corporate income, was at about 12%. Now we're estimating for 2027 that sales tax will increase by over 10%. Personal income tax drops 8%, and it's about even. In fact, this has increased 2% or even over the last year between 2026 and 2027, and we're relying less on corporate. So it's really interesting just to sort of see the role that sales tax is playing in the state economy and what that's going to do in the future. How, if we're going to be more reliant on sales tax income, what's that do when we are in declines or in recessions, and as a state and as households are buying less. So those revenues and appropriations, right? So we have that ongoing revenue, that this kind of sort of moves forward from the chart we just saw a moment ago. This is that same revenue in the previous chart. And we can kind of see it here in the darker green here, or if you're colorblind, this is just the darker color at the bottom on the chart. And we can see those ongoing revenues declining. In red, we see the appropriations. And again, the appropriations are those expenditures that the state is willing to spend. And so we see those increasing. Now, for the first time, we have expenditures and appropriation levels that are much higher than the actual revenue coming in. And the state needs to use surplus dollars to backfill in order to get up so that they have an expenditure limit that is at least at or above the appropriation limit. So in this case, the governor is recommending about $9.666 billion in expenditures and appropriations for the state. But the expenditure limit is at $9.877 billion, so about roughly $200 million above where the governor is recommending. Down here, you can sort of see, again, this is those transfers. The reason that we can do this is because the state is using more and more reserve funds to backfill in order to pay for those appropriations. Those reserve funds are technically going to remain full. That's a little bit of a misnomer in some cases. Statutorily, they are full because they're based on ongoing revenue, but we can kind of see that as the revenue declines, those reserve funds are also declining. But because the percentage is based on ongoing revenues, they still technically remain full. Here we can start to see that decline in our emergency and our cash reserve and our economic emergency funds being reduced and going to the general fund. But the biggest decline is really coming from the taxpayer relief fund. So we saw a really large increase coming in due to a lot of the COVID funding coming into the state in the last few years. That all went into the taxpayer relief fund when we didn't spend what we were given. And so that increased to about $4 billion. Now the state is really using those funds to backfill. And we can kind of see that's already going to decline about 33% over the course of 2 years. The question is, and that remains to be seen, is this fund going to run out before these ongoing revenues match the appropriation, the expenditure levels? So the legislature and the governor seem to think so and seem to be modeling in this case that they will. Again, we don't know yet, and it does remain to be seen. So just sort of a recap, that general fund revenue is going to decline about 1.4 billion between 2024 and 2026 before we potentially see a rebound starting next year. So the REC does play that vital role, and the March meeting is going to be an extremely important meeting for the state budget to see if those revenues need to be further reduced or not. So state reserve funds are technically full, but that's in quotations because they are being statutorily reduced due to the reduction in revenues. But why does this sort of matter? I bring this up is because, again, state aid is the largest portion of the state's general fund appropriation, roughly 41.4% in total. ESAs, we can start to see now, are taking a big bite out of that percentage as well, up to 3.6% estimated in 2027. Medicaid is going to be another huge factor in the state being able to appropriate money this year, is because the federal government was backfilling Medicaid. We had increased enrollment due to COVID. That has all since disappeared. And so the large reserves that the state had in their Medicaid fund have now disappeared. And the state's going to need to come in this year during this session and adjust their budget for 2026, their appropriation budget, and for an increase of $70 million to Medicaid. We'll see even larger increases again next year because those reserve funds are now depleted. The rest of state government, all those other agencies except the transportation department, they all have to live within 34% of that remaining funds. So it gets stretched thin quickly. So again, why does this matter? Understanding the state's budget. What we like to do is it sort of helps improve your budget realism, right? So what we're trying to point out is maybe not best to be overly optimistic with the state's contribution to your budget in the form of SSA. You need to be really realistic about what you're budgeting this year or for next year in the next few months. It gives you a better understanding of what the legislature can realistically commit. So, if there's increases that they do give to you, it's going to be important to understand whether those are sustainable. Are they within the school aid funding model, or are they one-time dollars that you can't rely on in the next year? And the goal of this is to help improve your legislation at advocacy. We really want to sharpen your asks to your legislator, understand where they're coming from, understand the pressure of the budget that they have, and really what is a lack of dollars that they have. And so rather than coming in and asking for the moon, sharpen those legislative asks, and we'll talk more about that at Day on the Hill coming up next Monday. Okay, so I don't see any questions or anything yet. So I'm just going to continue to move on. So governor's recommendations, let's talk about SSA. So the governor is recommending a growth rate of 2%. That's roughly an SSA dollar figure of $160 a student. The governor is also recommending extending property tax relief and the PTRP, the property tax replacement payment. This will increase by another additional $10 million. I have a slide on that later. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But anytime there's a property tax increase, or property tax relief increase, excuse me, that means that that state is giving more money towards property tax to lower the rates, not money to you, right? So this is just swapping what would have been a property tax dollar with a state dollar. Lowers your rate, doesn't give you any extra money. Big this year is the governor is recommending using state aid for the budget guarantee. The budget guarantee we're estimating to be at 2% would be $42.2 million. I do have another slide on this. For those who are just new members within the last year, again, and if you haven't learned this already, you will learn this. That budget guarantee is a way to sort of step down if you have declining enrollment or less dollars coming in. It just takes a look at what your amount would have been last year, and if you don't increase by 1%, then it's going to give you an artificial increase in your budget of 1%. So 101% of what your unadjusted budget would have been last year. This is in the form of property taxes, though. So it's never been state aid. And so this is a new thing that the governor is recommending. We don't know if this is a continued idea or if this is just a one-time. So if you are curious about those budget guarantee estimates, Taylor has put a link in the chat, and you can see where we estimate your budget guarantee to be based on the governor's recommendations at 2%. She's also recommending an additional $14 million for educational support personnel salary supplement. That'll be the third year. This is designed to sort of help prop up and increase salaries for your non-salaried staff, including paras. So this still is not baked into an appropriation. It's not baked into the school aid funding formula. So we view this as one-time money. So if this does come to fruition, if the legislature does pass the $14 million, again, we always recommend that you don't consider this ongoing funding, consider it one-time funds and use it as such. So the legislature, it's now up to the legislature. They may decide on a different number. We have not seen any bills from them yet. I don't really expect to immediately. They are a little bit busy probably with the pipeline conversation right now. So we will wait to see what the legislature starts to look at. Dave Doughton the other day in our in-depth webinar on the condition of the state mentioned that, a lot of times Senate comes in at a different number, a little bit lower than the governor, and the House either comes in at the governor's number or a little bit higher, and they start negotiating. We'll see if that happens this year. Equity funding. So again, that reduces the inequality between a district that has a higher district cost per pupil than a district that has a lower one. The governor has not traditionally recommended increases to this, and so that is par for the course that she didn't this year. Last year, the legislature did add additional $5, brought that sort of variance down to $135, which is great because it used to be at $175 per pupil. So remains to be seen if the legislature will continue to try and reduce that inequity. Transportation equity funding again grows by the SSA rate of growth. So that could be an additional $33.3 million doled out to districts with higher than average transportation costs per pupil. And I know Taylor's going to put another one, the link to that. We have estimates available for you based on 2%, based on the governor's recommendations that is available on our website in our SSA advocacy toolkit. So, but I'm not going to go through a lot of detail on this chart. I did want to just sort of point out one thing in here. So the governor's recommendation of 2%, that's an increase of $73.8 million. And so you probably see this number, you're probably going to see some people championing and parroting this number. I do want to be cautious and just sort of let you know that the reality is that $73.8 million is an increase. 42.2 million of that is just the budget guarantee, so property tax relief, right? So that's not new money. Another $21.9 million, the last couple of years, we've had about $22 million coming from the taxpayer relief fund to prop up the school aid dollars. So the governor is not recommending an appropriation from that, which artificially, again, increases this number. The reality is 2% increase is actually a lot closer to only about a $10 million increase compared to last year. If you take away these other two sort of dollar figures. And that is mainly due to the fact that we've had declining enrollment the last couple of years. and especially a large declining enrollment between October 2024 and October 2025. All right, so budget guarantee. So $42.2 million. This is likely the highest budget guarantee on record for the state. I've gone back to 2002 and searched, and I provided you a chart for the last 20 years, back to 2020, back to 2008. You can kind of see that that is much higher. It's almost $18 million increase over last year at 2%, 199 of you, more than half of our districts will be on the budget guarantee. This map is available if you're curious on the SSA advocacy toolkit as well. But again, feel free to, there's a link in the chat to take a look at those budget guarantee numbers by district. New money. So we use a term called new money. Again, this looks at what is the amount of money that you're getting that's free of categoricals, free of restricted. So that means that this is the money that you're going to get as a district that's not attached to a categorical like teacher salary supplement or professional development or special education. And we take a look at that and see what is your unrestricted new money. And by and large, because most districts will be on the budget guarantee, we can kind of see that most districts are not going to be receiving a lot of new money. In fact, and still 90% of all the districts at 2% SSA will be below inflation this year. Also, because we're using 3%, that would be below any collective bargaining agreements that are set at 3%. So keep that in mind. So in total new money for this year, we're really only seeing about $35 million come to school districts. Transportation equity, again, this is just sort of a map of all the districts that we're assuming will receive it. The money is, again, doled out based on your 2025 transportation costs, basically divided by your budget enrollment, and you get a per pupil cost. If your per pupil cost is above what is the adjusted average, you will receive some transportation equity dollars on a per pupil basis. So we can kind of see that the statewide average is $452. The money that the governor is recommending at 2% increase, 33.3 million, would only get us to an adjusted average. We can only buy districts down to $477 roughly. So that means that there's 120 districts below the statewide average, you would not get transportation equity. If we were able to buy down to the statewide average, there's 12 districts that would receive it that are not receiving it based under the governor's proposal. But we are anticipating at least a 2% that 193 districts would receive some transportation equity funding aid. All right, again, property tax relief. This is the property tax replacement payment. This is the largest form currently of property tax relief in your school aid. And so this we're anticipating this to be about $146 million. And there is a question, if SSA was higher, this would reduce the number on the budget guarantee and less on local property taxes increase. And you need to form, yep. And so we can continue that conversation. We have some good resources out there, but I will just point out over here that the higher that the SSA number goes, the lower the number of districts go under the budget guarantee. And again, that budget guarantee works on what is your budget, what is essentially your district cost per pupil multiplied by your certified enrollment. And that kind of gets you that amount of dollars, and we compare it to the previous year. If you are higher than 101%, you get whatever that figure is. If you are lower, then you get up to 101%. But it does start to step down. If you are a district with declining enrollment, it will stair step you down. So you won't always get 101% of what you would have gotten 5 years ago. It just takes a look at the calculation from the previous year and it starts to step you down, gives you at least 1 year to sort of work on adjusting your budget, right sizing your district if you need to as well. But if you have more questions on the budget guarantee or anything like that, please feel free to reach out. We have some great slides that Jan and I have put together that really walk through how that budget guarantee works. Okay, so teacher salary supplement, this is something I do want to be point out to you guys, be cautious of. So the last 2 years, your teacher salary supplement has increased based on need. The Department of Management has come in and looked at your teachers and wanted to get them up to the new minimum salaries. So they appropriated money based on getting your teachers up to the minimum salaries. This is the first year where TSS goes back to a per pupil basis. That means that we're multiplying this enrollment times your TSS cost per pupil, which varies by district dramatically. So while TSS amounts will increase under the governor's proposal, it should be noted that it's not an equitable increase. We're going to see a 2% TSS would increase it by almost $13 million statewide. Looks like a good number, but the reality is only 2 million of that is an increase because of your budget enrollment. So the remaining $11 million that we're talking about here is only an increase that go to districts with ESA students. So if you do not have high ESA numbers or your ESA numbers increased, that's mostly where your new TSS dollars are coming from right now, under 2%. And this is likely, even if you had higher SSAs, just because of that enrollment declines that we're seeing over 270 districts with enrollment declines, you would likely not be receiving TSS dollars if it weren't for the ESAs. So 114 districts will be on the TSS budget guarantee. This is similar to the one that I just talked about. Your TSS, your teacher salary supplement, as well as your other categoricals, have a budget guarantee. It says if you don't make at least 100% of the unadjusted from the year before, then you will guarantee you 100% this year. So that means 114 districts are going to get exactly what they got last year. But that also means in 2028, you will likely see your TSS dollars being reduced. So it's important to note that. It's important to note where your teachers are at. Look for any funding cliffs. What I mean by funding cliffs is if you have an 11-year teacher making $55,000 this year, next year you have to get them up to 62. And you can't rely on additional TSS dollars to do that. So that's going to come out of your general fund, or you're going to have to make changes as needed by district. Again, educational savings accounts, though that, as we talked about, that number still continues to grow. It is outpacing what the original fiscal note projections were. But we do anticipate seeing this slow down a little bit. 2026 was the first year where there was no income restrictions. So roughly 98% of all non-public students have an ESA. I'm not sure why the remaining 2% don't. Could be various reasons, including ideological. So we anticipate seeing some increases, especially as capacity expands, and continuing in the kindergarten years as these students start in school. But we don't anticipate seeing the increases that we've seen in the past so far, unless capacity starts to increase statewide. Okay, so that kind of goes through everything I want to talk about SSA and school aid. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to kind of move on to governor's property tax bill. So there's two things I'm just going to talk about. One sort of in the weeds. I'm going to talk about that first. So this might be an opportunity. If you need to check your phone, this could be your moment to do it. So there's a removal of a two-tier payment. So if you own commercial property or if you know someone who does, their taxable valuations, that first $150,000 is based on residential, which is different than a commercial rate because the rollback for residential is down to 44%. The rollback for a commercial is 90%. So your property as a commercial property owner, first $150,000 is based on your residential, lowers your exposure to property taxes. The remaining is at 90%. The governor is recommending moving that to $250,000. The other thing that she's recommending is removing the two-tier payment. This will be the second time this happens. This is a payment that goes to school districts, goes to cities and counties because there was a reduction in commercial property taxes and that taxable valuation. The state came in and backfilled for schools to the tune of about 45, $46 million. Um, and so that would go away. What does that mean? It means it may have an impact on your property tax rate. So any levy rate restricted, you may see a reduction in revenue. So that's going to include if you're maxed out on your PEPAL, if you're at 270 on your debt service, you would likely see a reduction under the governor's proposal in the revenue collected at a 270 versus prior. Any levy that's not rate restricted, like your additional levy, you might see an increase in that additional levy, or you may need to increase your rate, like your management fund, if you're trying to get to a certain revenue level. The big thing, though, that we want to make everybody aware of is the governor is recommending revenue changes to save. So currently, that 1 cent infrastructure from the sales tax, 1% of it, 1 cent of it goes to school infrastructure. It's doled out on a per capita basis. It means that you get the same amount that everybody else does on a per pupil level. This year, it's roughly $1,355, I believe. But said before that's doled out, currently 7% of it is carved out and goes to additional property tax relief within the school aid funding formula. Okay. And it goes to districts with really high taxable valuation, like high additional levy rates. The governor is recommending that this get increased all the way up to 30% by 2030. So that is supercharging it, and it is going to create some headaches for the revenue coming to you as a district because we weren't anticipating increases like this. Taylor has put a save revenue loss tool in our chat. I highly recommend you downloading it and taking a look at it. You can go by district or look at the statewide numbers. I'm going to show it, and I'm going to pop it up in a minute, but statewide, what we're looking at compared to current law and proposed law is you can kind of see blue line there on the top is your proposed amount that we would expect to give out to school districts every year. The orange line is the reduction that we would anticipate by year for the next 10 years. Cumulatively, that means a reduction of about $1.2 billion statewide over the next 10 years of lost save revenue. The tool that, let me see if I pull it up real quick, that Taylor put a link into, this is what it looks like. You can take a look at your save revenue. I've picked on a district here. Since this is on a per pupil level, I've put flat enrollment in here. There's also a drop down. You can use the DE projected changes as well, or anything in green here, you can just input your own. If you have better enrollment numbers and you're more comfortable with using your own enrollment change numbers, by all means do. But what this does is it's going to look at your current, where we'd estimate your current revenue, what we'd estimate your revenue under the Senate study, under the bill, and that difference. And it's going to chart it out for you as well. And you can see for this district, roughly about $2 million over the course of 10 years. The great thing about this is that it is printer friendly. So once you pick your district, feel free to print it out, bring it with you today on the Hill, and have a conversation with your legislators about how you use that saved funds and why it's important, why it reduces property taxes, because ultimately, if you're going to be using this for infrastructure, it means you're not bonding, and that lowers property taxes for everybody. So that is available on our website, and again, encourage you to use it. If you have any questions on it, feel free to reach out. Okay, so last thing I'm just going to talk about before I let you guys go, 3 property tax bills. We're on a collision course. There are a lot of changes in some of them. There are fewer changes in other ones. So we have not fully gone through and vetted everything. We have not been able to do district runs and everything. Some of this we will not be able to do. The state as a whole lacks parcel level data for property tax for properties. So it means we can't look at changes to, let's say, homestead credits or exemptions very well. And we certainly can't do it at a district level. So it's going to be difficult to really map some of these out as they move forward. And we're hoping that we get additional assistance from the Department of Management in being able to do that. But what I've done is I've sort of highlighted a few things for you on the three bills that we have. And in bold, I've put in what we find are the most important things to really can know and to consider. I do see that there is a question in there, and I will come to that in just one moment. So, but I do see your question. So on the governance study bill, again, reduces save revenue. We just talked about that. The Senate study bill puts restrictions on the management fund. This isn't in either other bill. So it will reduce the amount of revenue and when you can levy for your management fund. We have problems with this, and we've talked about this last year. We will have another tool on our website shortly, but the reality is it tries to limit you to 160% of expenditures. However, it's looking 2 years in arrear. So that means that most districts, when we model it out, go negative on their management fund before they can finally levy and bring money back into their management fund. That's going to create a massive headache for your SBO and for your district. Senate study bill also has PEPAL and debt service levy rate reductions. So the idea behind the Senate bill is that they will increase taxable valuations, and the hope is that if they reduce the rates, you won't get harmed. We can't figure that out yet. Until we have some better data, we will continue looking at it. We're hopeful that we can at least start modeling maybe one or two districts or a county and kind of figure that out. But it sort of remains to be seen. The House study bill just dropped yesterday. So I was busy yesterday reading through this. One of the most, this is the smallest of all of them, and really one of the most important things, and one of the only things that impacts schools. The House study bill really goes more after cities and counties and not after schools. But there is an important note in here that, or section that all save revenue bonds would have to go to voters. So again, currently you do not have to bring those to voters unless it comes up for an athletic facility and you get it petitioned, then that vote has to go before the voters. It's only 50% if that happens for that for those save revenue bonds that go to votes. This is proposing that any and all save revenue bonds, you'd have to have a public hearing, and it has to go to a vote with 60% to pass. So that is something that we wanted to make you aware of, and you can work on advocating on that. So one of the questions that we had in here is what happens if districts have already bonded against their expected save revenue and this passes, the revenue is no longer there. That is what we need to talk to the legislators about because we don't have a clear answer on that. You have, our hope is that that you bonded and that any change in that is going to reduce, but not to the point that you can't make principal and interest payments. Piper Sandler, I know, is working with districts individually to look at that and see how you may get impacted. And we've seen one or two districts in that modeling that could potentially get impacted. So that is an extremely important point, and that's something that needs to be brought up to your legislator. All right. So final thoughts, and I get to finally let you guys go. So 2027 SSA that's supposed to be enacted by February 12th. This is in law. However, this law seems to be written in pencil, not ink. They never make this, or almost never make it. Exceedingly rare that it is enacted within 30 days. That lack of timeliness always impacts your budget certification process because you don't know what SSA is going to be in time. So budget conservatively. You do a lower SSA if you need to in there. I recommend knowing what 0% looks like this year. I'm not saying that that's what they're going to go with. We don't know. But because of the state of where revenues are and what the legislature is facing, it would be really important as a district that you have conversations of what 0% SSA looks like and what you may need to do to get there and any changes to your district. Property tax bills, all three got introduced early, which is good. Continue the conversation. Likely, we're anticipating this will take the whole session to finalize, even if there is an agreement. So, but continue to monitor our advocacy and action page. And for updates, Emily does a great under the Golden Dome every Friday. So if you don't have time to read through the bills that are on the move, she will give you a quick highlighted update. But other than that, there's lots of bills that are starting to pop. Including one today. We had a bill, there's a bill sub on increased flexibility. So you can bring those TSS dollars if you have any extra TSS dollars, bring them over into your flexibility account if you choose to. And you would not need to do a public hearing anymore. It'd just be a board resolution. So we're excited to see if that will move forward. We are registered in support. There's loads of other bills out there right now. And if you come to Day on the Hill, Emily and Dave and Cindy from the AEAs and Kate from the AEAs are all there to talk about those bills, talk about legislative advocacy, get you ready and get you sent up to the Capitol so you can go talk to your legislators. Again, that's on Monday. We really do hope to see everybody. So if you have, that's all that I have for you today. I will check to see if there's any more final questions that pop up. And I know it might take a minute to type, so I will give you guys just a few seconds here. All right. Well, if not, I hope that this has been useful for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Again, our goal here is to really, you do not have to be an economist to be in your role. Let's see here. Guaranteed increase if they go up. So, would you anticipate the amount of the budget guaranteed to increase if they go up, go to 0%? I'm guessing that maybe you tried to type zero. Yes. So your budget, all districts, almost every district would be under a budget guarantee at 0%. In fact, if you get the slides later and you look at them, and they will be available on our website as well as a recording of this, at 0%, we'd anticipate 274 districts to be on the budget guarantee. So should we be reaching out about making appointments on Monday? Nope. You can, our staff will assist you with that. If you would like to let your legislators know in advance, though, that you're going to be there, that would be great because it is a Monday, unfortunately. So they do start a little bit later on Mondays. So it's probably a great idea if you are coming, let your legislators know that you will be there on Monday and you'd love to be able to talk to them. Our staff and AEA staff and SAI staff will be there to assist you on getting you there to meet them. Yep. You are correct. They don't have their schedules yet for Monday, but they tend to, so they start a little bit later on Mondays, but they tend to get there sometime. Well, I'm not 100% sure when they all get there, but they all sort of show up and get there before they gavel in, which can sometimes be at about 1 o'clock. So our goal is that that they do show up, that they get to see all the exciting and really great stuff that the students put together in the rotunda. So just make sure you let them know that you are going to be there and let them know, especially if you have a school that's presenting the Day in the Hill, please let your legislators know that those students are going to be there and they'd be very excited to meet with them. Okay, well, I'm going to let you guys go again. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope it's useful information to really look at those high level information, try to relate it back to your district. And I appreciate all you guys' time. We look forward to seeing everybody that can show up on Monday. Please do come down. And if not, feel free to reach out at any point in time to myself, to Jan, to Michelle and Emily on our government relations team. We're here to help and here to assist and make sense of all this for you. All right, we'll see everybody. Thank you.